Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the monastery, the open bar of the internet, the world's greatest shit show, and the place where we, the good brothers and sisters of this most holy of temples, seek enlightenment through the drunkest, craziest, and most batshit ways possible. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me I have a newcomer into the temple, creator of the Red Die system, which just recently wrapped up its Kickstarter. In fact, it wrapped it up 24 hours ago at the time we're recording this. The one and only Mark Parish, also known as Stumpy. How you doing today, man?
I am doing great, and cheers to the temple. Here's my first sip.
It's always
very tasty.
It's always nice when people apply the BYOB rule.
Well, I mean, if it's the open bar of the internet, it's you gotta. So this evening's beverage of choice is bourbon and ginger ale.
Not a bad combination. Although it's funny you mentioned bourbon because I ended up watching a mini doc about Maker's Mark, and where I found out that because of the whole dipping the top in wax that they do, they cycle people out every 30 minutes.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, because
interesting.
Mostly because of how exhaustive it is to handle it, and the fact that you're handling hot wax.
Right. My hands are on fire. Get the next guy in.
Mm-hmm. So
perfect.
I asked this to everybody, and I asked this to every newcomer, but we have to open with the humble beginnings, in a sense. So, walk me through your first introduction to role-playing games and what made it stick.
Well, it didn't stick for a long time. So the first introduction, which I absolutely loved, I was, I don't know, 5th grade or so. And my local game store, I would go there regularly for an old board game called Cosmic Encounter, and they had a lot of, new releases coming out. I went in one day, and there was this funky-looking box set for a new game from TSR called Gamma World. So yes, this was late 70s, Gamma World Edition 1. And so that was my first role-playing game when I was, in middle school. And I absolutely loved it. So played that for years, and as Gamma World came out with new editions, I played Edition 2, Edition 3, Kind of got away from role playing in high school, which is actually when a lot of people pick it up. In college, I tried writing my own. It was horrible, by the way.
Well, the first thing you do sucks.
Yes. But what came out of that, even though the game system was way too crunchy, clunky, did not work well, the game world I put it in, I have carried that game world with me from game to game ever since. So whatever game I play, it's always been in that world. And that world actually has its own book now, but that's not what we're talking about tonight. But yes, that game world is out there officially.
Mm-hmm.
So
now with that in mind, would you consider the red die system to be the first in-house TTRPG setup that you've worked with? Because you did write for Gallant Knight when it came to Advanced Tiny Dungeon based on the Tiny D6 system.
Yes. So this is my first game that is its own thing. So the first two books I have, you're correct, were with Gallant Knight Games. So before, in my RPG journey, I'd always done the bigger, crunchier games. Like Cypher System was my last one, and don't get me wrong, it's a fantastic system. But as I'm playing Cypher System, I came across this Kickstarter for something called Tiny Dungeon. I thought, that sounds cute. I'll back that. And that introduced me to minimalist RPGs, which is where I find myself now. And so the Tiny D6 system, Tiny Dungeon, and all of its associated books, if you like minimalist RPGs, the Tiny D6 system by Gallant Knight Games is fantastic. Alan Barr is great to work with. He allowed me to write Advanced Tiny Dungeon, and he actually put it out. And he actually thought it was so funny to have an advanced version of a minimalist game. He released it on April Fool's Day, just because, why not? Yeah. So yeah, Alan. If you ever have a chance to work with Alan Barr, he is really good in the industry.
I've wanted to bring Alan Barr into the temple in one form or another, but given the whole D6 system's second edition, I've had a few people asking if I'm going to bring him in at some point, given how one of the reviews I did a long time ago that got me a lot of attention was doing a retrospective on the Star Wars RPGs. And I started that out with covering Star Wars D6 Revised and Expanded.
Right, and for those who aren't unaware of what Mildred's talking about is Alan Barr, the D6 system 2E just finished its Kickstarter a week or two ago. Mm-hmm. So that's West End Games with Alan Barr was working on that one, and it's looking really good.
Yeah, people who are fans of the West End D6 system are certainly eating good between that and what Magnetic Press has been doing lately, starting with Carbon Gray and now with Planet of the Apes.
Oh, nice. But as far as you're asking about Red Die, yes. Not that I ever go off on tangents. We don't do that here.
No, not at all.
No, not at all. So yes, Tiny D6 introduced me to minimalist games, and I haven't been back to a bigger game since then. So even while I was writing Advanced Tiny Dungeon, I was kind of tinkering with my own system. So there's a first one that's actually free on Direct2RPG because it didn't work, but it was fun, so I whittled it down to a 4-page microgame. So if you look up Polyhedral Card System on Direct2RPG, it's out there for pay what you want, grab it for free. What was interesting about that one was it was dice plus cards, which we're used to role-playing games. You roll your dice, so it's pure chance. Here you have a hand of cards. You play one, add a dice to it. So there's a player choice element to it. But I don't want to go too deep into that because that's not the game we're talking about tonight. But the point is that was kind of the precursor to Red Die System, to RDS. There are a lot of things in that game are still in RDS, but that core decision system was the player choice aspect made it a whole lot of fun. In the end, that's also what caused me to shelve the game because depending on the game group you're with, people would take a long time to choose their card. So the very thing that made it fun also slowed it down at the table. So sadly, I went away from it. And that's where we find RDS picking up, using a lot of the same skills, abilities, magic systems. I just changed the decision engine.
Yeah, I can certainly get that. Now, as I understand it, this particular system, its core mechanic isn't really built on a pass fail, but whether or not you succeed in actions. What exactly would you mean by that distinction?
No, it is a pass fail. It is a, I mean, you succeed or you fail, but you're not rolling against a static target number. It's it's an opposed roll system. So one of the core concepts I was building around here, one of the things I've always liked is your stats are dice sizes. So rather than your stat being a number that has some modifier that adds to a roll, your stat tells you what dice size to roll. So if you're strong but clumsy, you might have a strength of D8 and a dex of D4. Um, so you take that. So when you're going to do an action, you roll the dice associated with whatever stat you're doing. The GM sets a difficulty. That difficulty is also a dice size, anywhere from D4 to D12.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's your die versus the GM's die, which is called the red die.
Yeah.
And yes, the GM's die must be red, or we will send the dice police to your house. We will brook no other die colors. We,
I I think if I wanted to troll my players, sometimes I would give them dice that I specifically commissioned to be other numbers in other languages. Like somebody didn't have a D20, so I gave him one, but I didn't tell him the numbers were in Japanese.
that is perfect. I did see a Greek alphabet D20 one time. Well, that looks great. I'm not sure what to do it. Somebody says, "Well, you have an alpha, you have an omega." Sure, I can tell you what the 1 and the 20 are. Values in between, not so helpful.
Mm-hmm. I think there was one other case where I told it where somebody forgot a couple D10s because we were running basic role playing. And he said, "Do you have a D100 I could borrow?" And I'm like, "Okay, here you go." And I give him the physical D100, the thing that looks like a golf ball.
That never stops rolling.
Yes. Yeah. I considered using that at like a driving range once, but I knew if I didn't do it because I knew if I did that, I'd not get it back. Because Lord knows I'm not going to go out to a driving range to find one golf ball. If you've ever been to a driving range, you know that's not happening. You go to driving ranges to blow off steam.
Right. If you're going to go out there on the range to get your ball, make sure to wear your armor.
Mm-hmm.
Because you will be a target.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, but I don't relish the idea of wearing full plate again.
Just don't do it in August.
Yeah, yeah. Don't do it in August, and don't do it on a busy day. Just depending on where in the world you are, doing it in August might not be a bad idea. I mean, as much as
I can honestly say I've never worn full plate, so good for you.
I have because of some of the stuff I've done in the past. Moving around in full plate isn't that bad. The bad part is the amount of time you have to spend waiting to get the stuff on, because it's not just the plate. You've got the chain under that, you've got the padding under that, and you've got somebody putting all of that on you for like 3 minutes. This doesn't sound like much, but when you're standing in that one spot while they put everything on you, that's 3 minutes. It's excruciating, and I hope to God you went to the bathroom beforehand.
That's actually what I was just thinking. So as soon as they get all on, then you go, "I need to pee." Yeah, well, that's too bad.
Saying you need to pee when they're starting to put the armor on is a good way to get everybody to hate you. But now, given that, and given the die-based approach when it comes to your stats.
Oh, right. We're talking about a game.
Yes. Who would have guessed?
I know.
Is I know that you have a list of skills and talents. Is it a case where
Correct.
just having those increases the die size by one, or would they affect the die in other ways? Because looking at the character sheet, you have them in
It's
sexes instead of their own
it
stats.
is skills. The difference between skills and talents are it. Yes, it is just we call it a bump. So rather than things adding or subtracting one from your die roll, things bump the die size before you roll at all. So say I have a an intelligence of D8 and I have the perception skill, that bumps that D8 up to a D10. Now, so that's what skills do. A skill just, when you're doing this thing, you get a bump on the check.
Mm-hmm.
So, but a lot of things in the game do that. For example, armor gives your opponent's die a bump down when they're attacking you. So, and because it's a minimalist game, we don't distinguish between cloth armor or full plate armor or a barbarian's furry loincloth. It doesn't matter. Armor is armor. Is that realistic? No, but it's a minimalist system. You want
I've
you
always
want
found the
speed and role
realism
playing
debate
over.
silly.
Yeah.
Um,
So that's which is why I went to minimalist systems versus big clunky systems. I'm not claiming big clunky systems. If that's what your group likes to play, that is absolutely fantastic. But for me, I've gone more the minimalist route.
I remember because I I've played through a lot. I played through a lot of games that came out in the '90s, especially the early '90s, and I had to deal with so many of those games that were trying so hard to be this version of realism that had this skill list that's about as long as the list of establishments that have kicked me out for being a smartass.
I don't know
Like,
if anything's quite that long, but I understand your point.
and especially any game from Fantasy Games Unlimited, and I've made it clear that Phoenix Command is a game I will not run again unless I'm paid. Uh, I brought it up briefly when I talked about how glad I was to see an alien RPG I can actually recommend to people when Free League came along, because up until that point it was the Aliens Adventure game, which was using a modified version of Phoenix Command, and Phoenix Command is infamously crunchy. In the worst ways, it's crunch for the sake of crunch.
Yeah.
I think my philosophy when it comes to crunch is I don't put crunch or minimalism on a pedestal. It's more about, does it support what the game is trying to be.
Right. I absolutely agree with you on that one.
And if the game is supposed to be being about kick-ass colonial marines who are getting their ass kicked by a xenomorph, then focus on that with the mechanics instead of trying to be an everything game. Obviously, Red Die System is a universalist game, so there is some of that everything. But that
Yes. Well, but like you say, you're true to your core. So if you're going to be an alien game, be an alien game. Red Die System, its core isn't an everything game. Its core is, let's create a quick, fun, simple system where people can get in and do stuff, and it doesn't matter what world you're playing in, whether it's medieval or modern or sci-fi, whether it's fantasy or real world. And you can play real world spies or medieval fantasy or whatever the heck you want. So, now, might you have to tweak the rules a bit? Well, sure. I know no one rule set's going to fit absolutely everything. But
and
I say we, but that's what I tried to do here was I described the game during the book as in terms of medieval fantasy because that's kind of the largest genre of role playing games. But at the same time, I throw things in of, if you're in a modern world, here's some rules for that. If you're, I make sure it's accessible to the other genres. Even if I'm describing things in terms of magic, you can also this thing that we're calling magic, this could be psionics, or it could be superpowers, or it could be whatever you want. Call it what you want to fit your world. This is how it works.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how it's kind of open to all.
Yeah. Now, given the fact that the core mechanic has the red die approach, I'd like to play a little bit of an association game. Consider this a really bad Rorschach test regarding each of the tiers of difficulty. Since you have it as D4 is very easy, and all the way up to D12, which is very hard. So what I'm going to do is go from the lowest to the highest, and you can tell me a type of action that someone is attempting that might be fitting for that die type.
Well, and it's not so much about general types of actions, it's specific situations. Like, you can take something as simple as unlocking a door. If it's an old door with a rickety lock that's going to be easy to get through, that'll be a D4. If you've got a master crafted lock, that's going to be a D12. So it's more about the specific situation versus the type of situation. But say climbing a wall. Okay, go ahead.
So, and I get that it's just more of using an example as kind of a ballpark of this kind of thing.
Right.
So I'll start with, what would you consider a D4 challenge?
A D4 challenge. I was going to say trying to grab a chicken that's running around the yard, but if you ever chase a chicken, that is not a 4. But sure, we'll go with you're trying to grab a chicken that's running around the yard, and that would be a dexterity check.
All right, the good old Rocky special. D6.
D6. Climbing a wall that's got some good handholds on it. So nice rocky wall.
So the rock wall you'd see in a standard gym.
Yeah. So it's got some good grips on it. It's not terribly difficult.
Mm-hmm. D8.
All right. So D8 is your kind of catch-all difficulty. That's kind of where you tell the GM kind of put everything here. So for a D8, swimming across a fairly fast-running stream and trying to get over there before that waterfall that's downstream.
All right. D10.
Oof, that is going to be hiding from some orcs who are really searching for you.
All right.
They're not just in the area, they're looking for you.
All right. And D12.
D12 is going to be, you're back to climbing that wall, but now it's pretty freaking smooth. Or you are trying to, for a dexterity check, you are walking across something fairly thin and perilous. It's raining, it's dark, it's windy. So you're trying to keep your balance without getting knocked off.
Mm-hmm.
And everything I've given are physical challenges. Of course, the game has the mental and social stuff also, but the physical is just kind of what comes to mind when you think about doing stuff.
Yeah, I can get that. Now, moving beyond that, you do have an extra effort system in a sense with the karma system.
Yes.
So how is that going to work out, and what would you say is the dividing line between momentum and karma?
Okay, got it. So karma is actually, it's a meta currency system. So karma is what you spend, but we found in our initial playtesting that you only earn karma when somebody gets a crit success or crit fail, which means you hardly ever got any, so it's kind of pointless. So what we added was momentum, which is momentum are points that build up to karma. You earn, and you get a lot of momentum during the game. So 5 momentum earns you 1 karma, and then you can hold up to 5 karma, which is your meta currency. Now, here's the thing. Karma and momentum are held by the party as a whole, and so anybody can earn it and anybody can spend it. You're not tracking it individually. So if you're all sitting around playing at a physical table, we have colored glass beads. We're just moving around in the middle of the table to track momentum and karma. So the players have a pool of momentum and karma, and the GM has a pool of momentum and karma. And then you can spend one karma to get a number of effects, like a bump up or down, or change a failure to a success, or a success to a critical success. Or honestly, one of the most common uses is, because it's an opposed roll system, make somebody re-roll their die, either you or the GM. And the GM can do it to you too. Remember, the GM is earning these points also. So karma makes for these great moments of snatching success out of the certain jaws of failure, or vice versa. The GM uses theirs and tanks your success. So it makes for some really good dramatic moments in the game.
Yeah. Or in some cases, grabbing defeat from the jaws of victory.
Yes, absolutely. But that's it's basically what allows a lot of just player agency in the game, and GM agency for that matter, since both sides have it. It gives you some control beyond just the roll of the dice.
Yeah, I can certainly get that.
And the funny thing was, when I first added it as a rule, I put it in there kind of as an optional rule of, let's try this as a playtest and see if it even works. That wasn't the core concept I was building towards in the game. It was a possible add-on that may or may not work. We'll throw it away if we don't like it. Turns out it was a freaking blast, and we we added to it. So it actually added a whole lot to the game.
Yeah. Now, one of the tricky things that can happen with setting agnostic games or universalist games is the magic question. And as I understand it, with your approach, you have the choice of magic style, and spells are more based on spirit point expenditure rather than some sort of charge system.
Correct. Rather than a set spell list. Magic in this game is more open. Basically, you can do whatever small effects you can imagine kind of within a sphere of influence. There are 2 magic talents in the game. And that goes back to the earlier question of skills and talents. So skills are things that give a bump on your dice. Talents are abilities to do other things, like let you talk to animals or cast magic or things like that. So you have Bulwark and Arcanum are the 2 magic styles, and they are basically, in terms of classic RPGs, think cleric magic and wizard magic. So, but functionally they both work the same. It's more, what are their spheres of influence? So obviously cleric magic, healing, protection, growth, things like that. Arcanum is kind of everything else. Within either one, the rules are the same, which is you can cast whatever small effects you can imagine. Just check with the GM. If you have something you want to cast, check with the GM, see if it's good, and you can cast a spell. GM will tell you whether or not a check is needed. Basically what's the difficulty of a check is needed, how much SP is it going to cost, which is your spirit points. The problem with a system like that is a lot of people have a problem with open magic systems because the very fact that you can do everything, people get stumped because they don't know what to do. It's like, great, you tell me I can do everything. Give me some freaking examples. I don't know what to do with this. So what Red Die does is, yes, it is an open magic system. Here's a couple of pages of sample spells for Bulwark. Here's a couple for Arcanum. So it gives you some very clear spells that you can use right out of the gate. Now, if you can think of others, great, check with your GM. But even if you can't think of any, you've got a spell list here. So it works for both kinds of people. Now, as to the question of being an open system and magic, that's the core rules of how magic works. And then you flavor that to whatever your world is. So in a fantasy world, it might just be simply magic. In a in a futuristic setting, it might be some kind of implant that enhances your mental abilities rather than pure magic. Basically flavor it however you want. It might be alchemy or thaumaturgy or whatever you want to call it. In a steampunk world, you might have gadgets that let you cast these spells. Who knows? When you create your world, you can say, what is it and how does it work in your world? But regardless of that's just flavor, but the rules would stay pretty much the same. Now, you also mentioned that's a magic talent. What I wanted to do was, when I created the system, was kind of leave it open for player creativity. Do you want to be a death mage or an ice mage or a lightning mage? Your spells don't tell you that. The spell effects, if you look at those sample spell lists, they just tell you what the spell does, not how it looks. So that's where each person, when you create a magic, when you get a magic talent, you also say, what's your magic style? So you could say that you're a holy paladin and your magic spells look like white, yellow light. You could say you're a lava lightning mage. In this actually, one of my players actually did use this one, which was my spells look like lightning, but they're red and the damage is fire. So red lightning that does fire damage. So great, lava lightning mage.
And
so
well, red
that way
lightning
people
is the
can
thing.
play. There you go. Yes. But that lets players kind of create the character they want, where the magic looks the way they want, does the style of damage they want, whether it's fire or cold or physical or whatever. When I'm playing with my boys, I have my college age boys, we tend to play on the lighter, sillier side. So you never know what kind of magic style they're going to come up with. One of them threw baked goods as their magic style. So healing croissants and things like that.
Mm-hmm. And because of the approach that it's taken, it wouldn't take too much work to if somebody had a magic system that they wanted to implement in their campaign that didn't fit the existing talents. Now, when it comes to
you talking about things like necromancy or things like that, or
well, like say if somebody wanted to run a Star Wars campaign and they wanted to use
right.
Force, for instance.
The Force, yes, exactly. You could do that same kind of thing. You could take these same talents and say, sure, you're a Jedi, but you focus on this kind of things. Like some Jedi's are going to be better at healing, some are going to be better at attacking. You could use the same skills, but flavor it as Force rather than magic.
Yeah. And probably rip off the Control, Sense, and Alter Trinity from Star Wars D6.
I don't know that one. I'll have to look that up.
Control, Sense, and Alter were the 3 categories for Force abilities in Star Wars D6. And
gotcha.
If you were gaining Force abilities, you would get them in one of those 3 categories, and those categories also were treated as their own skills.
Yeah, you absolutely could if you wanted to play in that kind of world. Actually, the worlds is actually a good way to go with that. But if you have a list of questions, we'll stick to that, and we can come back to the worlds in a bit.
Yeah, and that. Well, speaking of worlds, I did see that you have in the material you had sent me. You have a collection of sample settings. Each one of them is only like a couple pages in length. Give or take. Some are more than others, but they're meant to be like little gazetteers.
That's a good way to put it. Mm-hmm. Yep. So the settings are probably about 40% of the book, because yes, I can say that you can play this system in whatever kind of world you want, but just like the spells, if you don't give some people something they can kind of sink their teeth into, can the system do it? Yes, but it still feels kind of empty. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So just like giving the sample spell list for the 2 spell talents, I also give 9 different sample settings, anywhere from 5 to 10 pages each. And it ranges from from medieval fantasy with various fantasy races to there's a modern day spy with no magic. Everyone's humans. You have archetypes rather than races. There's futuristic settings, both kind of a sprawl like mega city, and Star Wars like exploring the galaxy. So you got a couple of different futuristic settings to go with. There's an 1800s setting. So there's lots of different choices in there. One of them is even anthropomorphic forest animals. So you could be badgers and rabbits and squirrels.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'd say one of the other things I find interesting that was put in is the lengthy amount of optional rules that you have.
Yes.
Does make a good. I'd say maybe it's not a large amount, but it makes a good amount of pages within the thing.
It is. It's something like 15 or 18 pages in a book that's only 200. That's a fairly sizable chunk. I found that. I've been designing games my whole life. It's kind of always been my hobby. For years, I've been doing board and card games, a lot of which are out there if you know where to look. They're not in stores. They're on a print-on-demand site called the Game Crafter. But I found when I'm designing games, you come across something where you think, well, that sounds fun. But in playtesting, it doesn't work quite right, or it doesn't fit, or it makes the game a little too complex, or for whatever reason you like the rule, but you don't want it to be the main rule. And so that's rather than getting rid of those because they are still fun. For years, I've always tacked on optional rules to my games. And I do that in card and board games a lot. You have enough optional rules, there can be thousands of ways to play the same game. So what I did here with a lot of that is mostly what's in the optional rules are things that add complexity to the game. I wanted the game to stay quick and light and easy at the table. And so the things that add complexity I didn't want, they're still fun. And I did want them in the game and have people be able to use them. I just didn't want to do the main rule.
Mm-hmm. No.
And some of it's also like more race options. Like when we say that those, you could have, all humans or different fantasy races. Those are all how to do that is all described in the optional rules.
Mm-hmm. Now, given this very rules light, very narrative heavy approach, there is, and especially since it's going for a universal route, there is one aspect that I'd be curious how you'd interpret that within RDS.
Okay.
So I've talked about one recurring issue that ends up happening with a lot of cyberpunk or adjacent kinds of games, and that is the hacking issue. A lot of games, when it comes to hacking, it ends up becoming a duet between the hacker and the GM, and everybody else is just checking their phones.
Right.
Now, there's a bit of a skew when it comes to fantasy, obviously. But how would you handle some sort of hacking setup within the framework of Red Die system?
So first off, this is off the cuff because there are no hacking rules in the book. But if it was my group doing it, like you say, you want to keep your players engaged. So I would make sure the hacking environment isn't safe. If one person is going to be hacking in, their consciousness is somewhere else. The other people are going to be protecting them. So that way you can be kind of jumping back and forth between vignettes of the people on the outside, stuff's going down, there's some kind of ticking clock, or there's a fight going on, or holy crap, he's got to hurry. Meanwhile, the person on the inside is doing whatever they're doing while their mind is inside the computer. So you kind of jump back and forth between the groups. You don't have one group sitting there doing nothing. Mm-hmm. So that to me isn't about rules. It's about GMing and player engagement.
Pretty much. Obviously there's no one right answer to this kind of thing, but it is something that is worth considering, since a lot of the reason that problem exists is because people use what came before without really giving it a whole lot of thought. Like, why do we have this detailed duet like hacking system? Well, it's because it's what we've done in the past.
Right. And I tend to like keeping the party engaged in little things, like, say, fantasy dungeon crawl. So standard, good old fashioned. We've been doing this since, we've been doing this since before you were born, because I'm an old fart. The What I try to do is when a party goes into a room, you fix two problems at once. First is everybody's got something to do, and the second is you don't have 10 people making a perception check. First off, if there's 10 people in your party, it's going to be a slow game, so I don't know why I came up with that number. Whatever. 4 or 5 people doing a perception check, 4 or 5 people checking for magic. What I tend to do is we walk into a room, and whoever's got the perception skill, that person and that person only does a perception check. Somebody with detect magic checks for magic. So each somebody checks for traps. So everybody has something to do when you walk into a room. So nobody's standing around bored checking their phone, but you don't have everybody doing everything and just throwing out a ton of rules, ensuring they're going to succeed at absolutely everything.
Yeah, though, me personally, I never use perception checks. I might use something like search. That's because I feel a skill check or an attribute check should be when someone's actively doing something or actively reacting to something. And I don't think just looking is enough doing something. If you catch my drift.
I absolutely agree with you. To me, it's a terminology thing, but I agree with your point.
Yeah.
To me, perception means you're looking around the room. I have a perceptive ability, so I'm going to search the room. What might I find that somebody else would overlook? So different terminology, but I agree with your point, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And with that in mind, I know that the full book is in development, but what would you be shooting for as far as a page count?
Oh, the book's done. It's 206 pages.
All right. I wasn't sure if it was done or Ashcan done. Different levels.
No,
it's done.
And you're right about that. But no, it's already done. Been through layout, all the art's in it, so it is actually done. The only thing left to do is in a couple of weeks, since as you say, the Kickstarter just ended 24 hours ago when we're recording this.
Mm-hmm.
When Kickstarter releases funds to me in a few weeks, everybody on the Kickstarter will get the PDF copy. I already have a Google Forms page created where the book's already been fully edited, but as you know, in games or in writing, you can read it 100 times. Something's always going to fall through the cracks. So while it's at the PDF stage, before the physical books are printed, I'm going to open up a page. People can get the PDFs. They can play the game. If they find any small edits, they can put them in there. Now, this is small like grammatical spelling edits. This is not content changes because the book is done. So, but then that allows us to get any last lingering edits. Then it'll go to print, and then people that back to the physical level will get their books.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that certainly makes sense. But with that said, I do want to sincerely thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come all the way to my temple and enjoy the madness that happens around here.
Absolutely.
And anytime you see fit to return, the door is always open. As I often say around here, drinking is not mandatory, but it is encouraged.
And appreciated.
And of course,
Yep,
good.
I was going to say, and thank you very much for having me. I have enjoyed my first visit to the temple.
Mm-hmm. And of course, a sincere thanks goes out to everyone who took the time out of their schedule to come onto the show and enjoy the madness. And there will be plenty more where that came from, as there always is here, on the open bar of the internet. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra, I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody!
Luncha.